All right, very pleased to be joined on the program here this week by Adam Legge, as president of the Business Council of Alberta, businesscouncilab.com. Adam, great to have you with us here.
Thanks for having me on the show, Rob.
Well, we'll talk about things at the municipal level in a second, but sort of looking federally, I know there was a lot of interest last week as the Prime Minister, speaking at Edmonton, announced some of the first batch, I guess, of projects that are going to be advanced into this major projects office. Let me just get some of your thoughts and reflections on what we heard and maybe what's still to come here.
I would say, Rob, overall, we're generally pleased to see what was announced on the major projects and the initial list. Having said that, there are some things that we think are indicative of longer term challenges in Canada. I'll get to that in a minute, but I think it's a reflective of a government that finally understands that natural resources are Canada's strategic advantage, and we've seen everything from the LNG Canada Phase 2 project and several copper mines that have been approved. We saw sort of quote unquote future consideration for the Pathways project, which is a major project for Alberta and a number of our members. But then we're also seeing investments and priorities for trade infrastructure, which we know is critical if we're going to get off the reliance on the US and have a more diversified trading basket of partners. Then that's going to be critical. So we're happy to see that. I think it reflected a few things. Now, having said that, what you didn't see was an oil pipeline or certainty around increased production of oil and gas resources. And that's a reflection of the fact that the federal government still has not tackled the underlying policy and regulatory problems we have in this country with an oil and gas emissions cap, with Bill C-69, with Bill C-48, the tanker ban moratorium. You cannot A, grow production significantly in the country for oil and gas, and B, you cannot with certainty create the pipeline infrastructure needed to get that to new markets. So that is why we didn't see that kind of infrastructure. So the federal government does need to tackle those issues and scrap the emissions cap. They need to either repeal or carve out some part of C-48 to enable tankers to come off the West Coast, but to tackle some of the regulatory challenges. And until then, we're not going to see that project that ultimately will be Alberta's biggest opportunity from a resource standpoint.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, the creation of the office almost acknowledges that there is dysfunction in the regulatory system, and this is a way to try to bypass it instead of fundamentally tackling it. There were some hopeful signs, though, I think, on that front, some reports that maybe the oil and gas emissions cap is going to be removed. Certainly the premier seemed pretty bullish or optimistic following her meeting with the Prime Minister. And there were some signs there that there is that potential link between the Pathways project and a new pipeline. So were you seeing some of those same signs of optimism potentially?
Yeah, absolutely. And in speaking with Premier after the announcement, I think we are likely to see in some short period of time what we've been hoping for, which is sort of a grand bargain, which is something that enables some of either a full repeal or carve-outs in some of that problematic policy, like the cap and tanker ban, et cetera, that will enable the Pathways project to go ahead. Not only that, but any other sort of larger infrastructure and growth in our oil and gas production and export of that to new markets. So I think there's something in the works. I would expect to see that we're going to see something more favorable for Alberta and its energy sector. But ultimately, what I don't want to see is that we're doing it project by project as opposed to tackling the full landscape. Canada can't have a bring us a deal and we'll create different conditions for different projects. We can't, that's not a level playing field for investors. That's not going to attract international capital to Canada. We have to create a level playing field, which means scrapping the cap, fixing C-69. We can do these on carve-outs on an intermediate basis or a short-term basis, but long-term, we've got to solve these fundamental problems.
Yeah, definitely. We'll see what more comes from the federal government. Let's talk about municipal governments. We're just on the cusp here of municipal elections across Alberta. The Business Council of Alberta has released a new report, Municipal Matters, to sort of look at how local communities, local governments make decisions that do affect businesses and maybe how we can, change that relationship or build up that relationship. So let's talk about, the aim of this report and why it's important to highlight these issues right now, first of all.
Yeah. Rob, one of the things that we don't do as an organization is get to the local level policy and advocacy. But what I did hear from my members all across the province, from the north to the south to big cities to rural communities, was that they're concerned about the state of their local governments and what they are not doing in terms of supporting business and the priorities that business has as a critical stakeholder in investment in the community, job creation, tax revenues, etc. And so what we did is we sort of up-leveled everything and created a project and a report that's city, community agnostic, but really tackles the fundamental common issues you're seeing in every community across Alberta. And so what we found are really two key findings. One is that the business community does not feel valued as a critical stakeholder, that they are not engaged, they are not listened to, they are not valued. And secondly, that the priorities that they feel are most important aren't being tackled by their local governments. And that's things like crime and safety, that's efficient planning and development, that's leadership and stewardship of governance and the financial resources in communities. And so what we really want to do is just say, hey, all of you candidates out there, whether you're in Grand Prairie or you're in the municipal district of Foothills or whether you're in Calgary, Edmonton, or Lethbridge, these are the fundamental priorities that business leaders in Alberta want you to pay attention to.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, the issues around crime and disorder, and that stood out to me because we don't tend to think of those as business issues. And I think there are concerns that the general public has, but these are shared concerns and shared interests that businesses feel the impact of those issues in so many ways.
Rob, many of my members who operate in the big cities of Calgary and Edmonton have concerns about what they're seeing on social disorder in the streets of downtowns. To some degree, they have staff that are concerned for their safety in going to work in the downtown offices. We also have members in rural communities who are operating retail operations, who are having their storefronts vandalized and products stolen out of their shops. So it ranges from the big cities to the small communities. We recognize that this is a complex issue. It's wrapped around issues of mental health and addictions and homelessness, et cetera. And so this is not just let's throw more police on the street. We have to have some wraparound supports. We talk about that in the report. We also recognize this is not just the local governments. They have to work with the other two senior levels of government. This is all of government, all three levels have to work together to change everything from bail reform to presence on the street at the local level.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned permitting, and that's such an important step for any business. And we talk about regulations that exist provincially, federally. That all has an impact, but there is so much that rests at the municipal level that has such an impact on businesses. I guess permitting and all of that red tape is a big part of that, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, whether it's enabling housing to be built fast enough, whether it's getting projects developed, whether it's major traffic infrastructure, all of these things are taking longer than they should. Some of them are unclear. Some of them, you have two communities that are adjacent to each other that have very different approaches. So it can be hard to work municipally and jurisdictionally. There are some real great advances in technology, artificial intelligence, and large language models that can help streamline some of those projects that have very similar characteristics to previous ones. So we can cut time through that really governments should be adopting to enable the process to be faster, more efficient. There's also a belief that there's just, like every city in Canada, that there's just too much of a cash grab at the local level to the developer, which then gets passed on to typically the homeowner. And that is what is driving a large proportion of the housing cost increase in the country. So let's look at efficiency. Let's look at comparing ourselves to other jurisdictions. Let's make sure that we're making everything as seamless and efficient and affordable as possible.
What about the taxation side? I know there's been concern, certainly in the big cities, about the perceived imbalance between residential and non-residential taxes, and that's a real dilemma for local governments. But how does that need to be addressed, and what are the concerns of businesses on the taxation side?
I think many businesses feel that they pay an outsized proportion of the tax revenue to communities, but they actually have a lower burden and demand on the public services. So you and I as residential taxpayers, we use the streets and we use garbage collection, we use parks, etc. Businesses aren't using that. Their employees are, but their employees are paying that through their own residential property taxes. And so what the business feels is they're kind of, to some degree, a bit of a cash cow for that. We have seen some good progress, particularly in the city of Calgary, about trying to rebalance that residential to non-residential tax ratio, but it's still too high. And the problem or not the problem. Well, the reality is that businesses don't vote. Residents vote. So businesses don't get the ability to weigh in and provide input and guidance to city council on the critical issues and what that balance should be, because they're not voters. They just basically sit back and take the property tax rate that's developed by the cities and the communities, and have to pay that. And it's an imbalanced weight on the business community. And businesses are quite happy to contribute to a good quality of life in their communities. It helps with employee satisfaction and retention, but we need to recalibrate that a bit to put less demand on business because they aren't using as many of the public services and amenities.
Right. But that's the thing. And we need that development. We need businesses to start up. We need businesses to grow. And so, as much as we can think of, citizens versus businesses as though they're separate interests. I mean, it's kind of, we all have a vested interest in providing that kind of atmosphere and environment where businesses can thrive. It benefits everybody.
You're absolutely right, Rob. And in no way are our members saying they don't want to contribute to the quality of our cities and our communities. By no means are they saying that at all. They just want to make sure it's appropriately balanced. And they also are extremely strong contributors to many of the charitable and community-based activities. You look in larger centers and we see many of our arts and culture supported by the corporate sector. In many smaller communities, you'll see hometown parades and Christmas festivals and Lions clubs, all supported by, at ice rinks, supported by some of the local businesses. And so we have to take all of that into consideration, but businesses invested in making their communities strong and vibrant. And the ask in this report really is to local governments, hey, let's engage more. Let's consider us partners in the success and the vibrancy and the prosperity of our communities. We have concerns, we have issues, we have ideas in which we can contribute. Let's work more closely together, because right now there seems to just be a lack of engagement and connection with the business community that's so vital to success and prosperity in our communities.
And as you say, this report's not about endorsing anything or anybody, or even as a platform per se, but I guess about facilitating a conversation, perhaps. What do you hope comes of that?
Well, you're absolutely right. We don't endorse any candidates or anything like that. In fact, we don't even make recommendations at any city or community level. So it's just a message to all candidates out there, and ultimately after October 20th, when those governments are formed, that these are the priorities of business, and really an ask and a reach out to say, we have ideas, we have a desire to connect and engage with you, we have a desire to continue to participate in the vibrancy and prosperity of our communities. Let's work together. Whether it's creating a business advisory task force for city councils, whether it's having steering committees, whether it's engaging on specific issues, whether it's building and permit development, or whether it's crime and safety in downtowns, all of those things, working with local officials, planning departments, police departments, etc. We're just asking that local governments see business as a valued stakeholder and bring us into the fold.
All right, much more, including this report, Municipal Matters. It's all up at businesscouncilab.com. Adam, thank you so much for making some time for us here today. Really appreciate this.
My pleasure, Rob. Anytime.
Hey, folks, thanks for watching and listening. You can find us at robbreakenridge.ca. Also, make sure you hit that subscribe button below and stay connected with The Rob Breakenridge Show.